Nice to meet you here in Reading, and also I'm so lucky to know you.
Thank you.
And as far as I know, you have two children, right?
Yes.
And both of them are very successful
Yes.
and brilliant. Yeah. So also, I am a mother of five. Yeah, of 5 years old daughter. Yeah, and could you please give me some advice? Just how did you teach your children when they were very young?
Okay. Well, it's a very good question, and I could talk a lot about how I did it, but I'll try to give you one simple answer in a way. I think it is very, very, very important that if you want your children to do something that makes them successful, let us say, you have to model, you have to show that behaviour. In other words, if you keep telling the children, do this, do this, do this, but you don't do it, from a very, very early age, I think, that they understand that in some sense, that you are telling them something to do, but they see that you don't do it. So to make that into a practical idea, I really passionately and strongly believe that to be successful is to be very, very literate, to be able to speak, to be able to listen, to be able to read, and to be able to write. And I think one of the keys is reading, and therefore to model a reading behaviour from birth is vital. So both myself and my husband are avid readers. We read a lot all the time, and my children from birth just saw that. We didn't put reading into a box. We didn't read at a certain time. We were just reading all the time in lots of different ways. And I would argue then that my children very, very early on modelled that behaviour, that they naturally picked up a book and started to read. Even if they couldn't, they were showing something that they saw us doing. And from a very early age, particularly my daughter, it was commented what a wonderful reader she was, and I think she was just demonstrating the behaviour she saw in the house. So that's my the most important tip I would give for parents.
Yeah, I don't want to know your children read all kinds of books that they are interested in.
That's an excellent question, because people think reading is reading a book. I would say it's reading, and reading is lots of different things: books, magazines, newspapers, comics, labels, brochures. In other words, print,
poems,
things that they can absorb. So if you want to demonstrate that behaviour, you buy a newspaper every day, and you read it in the morning at breakfast, or you read it when you come home when you have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to do. I have to read the newspaper every day because I'm interested in what's happening in the world. So the key is reading, but don't think that reading is just a book. It's reading a broad range of materials.
Yes, very good. And as far as I know, your daughter is in yellow.
She's in Switzerland.
Yeah, and your son is in...
He will be going to Yale.
Yale. And do you think just reading books aloud when they were very young just brings them benefits after the graduation?
I'll give you a little bit of an anecdote.
Yeah.
When my son was interviewed to go to university, he was interviewed by 10 individuals, and I said to him, what were the questions like? And he said, they were so broad, they were so open that you couldn't answer them. And I would argue he was able to answer them in a way due to his depth of knowledge through reading. In other words, a broad, consistent spectrum of reading, a vast range of materials from a very, very young age, that in some sense, any question, he could link it to some sort of knowledge through his reading. And also, if you read deeply, and you understand something very well, you are then very curious about that.
Yeah.
And you move away from reading to investigating, looking out for, searching out for further knowledge. And particularly my children are like that. So they're very deep readers, but they're very interested in the wider world.
Yes.
And I think that is very important today in this modern world, that a child is open to all experiences.
Yes, and yeah, you know, we are adults, we are teachers. Yeah,
Yes.
could you please give some specific advice for us just how to read in our spare time, and what kind of reading materials can we choose?
Well, I think to understand what I've already said, that you are going to model behaviour for children, and then you model it for your students. So I would argue that at every opportunity you have something to read. So for instance, in the morning when the children come into a classroom, usually maybe you're standing there and you're watching them and making sure they're coming in correctly. But eventually the children will respect you and they will come in correctly. And this is a great opportunity that as the children are walking in, so you are constantly demonstrating them that when you are not teaching, when you are not in the role of a teacher, you are a reader. And the thing is, with very young children particularly, they like to imitate the teacher. So of course, it is vital, because unfortunately some children do come from a home where maybe reading isn't encouraged for various reasons. So it is the role of the teacher to then model that behaviour, to give all children a chance of a brighter future. So from my own experience as a teacher, always I would think of every way I could demonstrate the love of reading. Remember, not just a book. So anybody who would come, anybody who would be fronting the children, I would try and engage them into just look at the book while the children come in, and then they see that it's a reading world, that everybody is reading and being engaged. And I particularly noted when I was in Switzerland how that was very evident to me. The children were not using iPhones as much as I see in the UK, on the buses, in the shops, in the street. They were reading magazines, comics, books. It was much more focused on a modelled reading society, and I think that's why I found the children I taught there very, very good readers.
Yeah, just action is just louder than the words. Yeah,
Very
got
good.
it.
Excellent.
And the last question. Would you give some advice on just my students now when I come back to China now? What kind of books and what ways of reading shall I just give them? Just for my students, just at the age of 13 to 15.
Yes, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, because without knowing the children and the context, it's difficult to give advice. But I will just say a teacher I have recently worked with from China, her name's Shirley, and she also had this question, and we have engaged in some email communication, and she very much has set up what she's called an English corner. Now, in China, I know that English corner is a space where teachers stand or children stand and talk, but she twisted and changed this concept, which was known, the English corner, and filled the space with reading material, poems, catalogues, books, and then she's working with her students to find out what reading materials they like. Because of course, you model reading, remember the point I've made very strongly, I think, you're not telling them what to read. You really need to find out what excites your students and basically ask them, you know, if you're going to read a novel or read a book or anything for pleasure, if they aren't enjoying it, the question to be answered is why carry on. But if you have a strong relationship with your students, then you constantly ask them, do you enjoy this? How would it make it better? And you eventually build up some knowledge from them of what type of materials or interests they have. And you're looking for materials then, reading materials, to support that interest. But what you then do is you take them deeper. So, to give you an example, recently I was working with some teachers here, and we had to study a specific time in history. We're celebrating the World War I here at the moment, and so I looked at a variety of stories that I thought would capture the attention of those teachers, and I focused on one story, and I read that story to them, but then I showed them a succession of stories which had the same message, and it was their duty then maybe to, if they're going to present that to the children, to extend the knowledge of that story based on their understanding of their children. So it is a difficult question to answer, but I think that if you're a passionate teacher and you want all your children to succeed, you're always asking questions to support them to become great learners.
Yes.
That's what we all want.
Okay, thanks. Your good advice. Now I can conclude our conversation by one sentence. Just start your new day from reading. Yeah? Okay.